Hey guys, Paul Warburg coming to you back from the Utah wilderness today. Today I want to give a little update on North Korean troops in Ukraine. It's been a while since I made a video on this topic, but there is some interesting news that has come out in the last couple of days, that North Korea will be sending additional troops to the front line in Ukraine. I wanted to take advantage of that to just give a little update on my perspective of the North Korean troops in Ukraine, how things seem to be going, and what, if anything, we can make out of these recent developments. Most importantly, I want to talk about how the continued presence of North Korean troops in Ukraine and the specific actions that they're taking on the battlefield actually reveal a lot about Russia's current mindset and their current capabilities. So North Korean troops being present in Ukraine is an interesting development that made a lot of headlines and then people kind of stopped talking about it. But it's actually a very significant development where Russia has brought in troops from a foreign nation to help them fight their war against Ukraine, while at the same time talking very belligerently about the massive threat if Western nations did the same thing. It is a massive inconsistency, and it shows a real difference in logic. Not that we need to be reminded of this, but apparently maybe we do. A real difference in logic between the way that Vladimir Putin is approaching the war in Ukraine and Ukraine and its Western partners are approaching the war, where Russia has not been afraid to escalate and do things that they warn the other side away from doing. This is, of course, very common in war, but for some reason in this particular war, everybody has decided to give in to those demands. That said, the presence of North Korean troops in Ukraine is actually very confusing. There are a lot of theories as to why this has happened, but importantly, here we are several months after the first occurrence, and we haven't arrived at further clarity around any of those specific reasons, meaning that everything surrounding North Korean troops in Ukraine and the purpose of them is actually still in the realm of theory. From a strategic purpose, they have not played a big role, and indeed they never would have been able to play a big role because the volume of troops that was sent to Ukraine is just simply too small to make a difference. At its height, that volume was about 12,000 soldiers. And yes, they have been used in meat wave style attacks. And yes, Russia needs every person they can on the battlefield because they're in such a desperate situation. But even given those facts, the volumes of North Korean troops aren't remarkable enough to have a big strategic purpose, even from Russia's perspective. Maybe they were looking for more troops and they didn't get them. Who knows? And even further than that, the tactics that the North Korean troops have used has arguably gone to hurt North Korea's strength as a nation rather than improving it. What we have seen is that North Korean troops have a very terrible level of training. They are basically being trained live in action on the battlefield, and that is something that we've seen as they have tried to adapt their tactics after basically getting wiped out in many, many instances. Their tactics have often been to walk across fields in World War II style attacks with no presence of mind of the fact that there are drones flying above their heads, and these drones have taken them out, and it was clear in the early days when they were first arriving that they didn't even know what the drones were, which was actually very, very sad to watch when you consider that these North Koreans are still people and they are victims of a very brutal propaganda regime, and they really don't know how to think any differently than what they're told. And as I said, all of this has gone to hurt North Korea's strategic position because, like Russia, but actually to an even worse degree, the world had a certain picture of their mind of North Korea's military capabilities that North Korea promoted through parades and stunts and things like that prior to sending the troops there. But now that the troops are actually there, the world can see that, yeah, these guys aren't actually the real deal. Now, you can see why North Korea would make the decision to send the soldiers in the first place, maybe not knowing that and not having the wisdom to foresee that. But what's confusing is the decision that's now been made, where North Korea, despite all of these facts, is sending additional troops into the battlefield. So why are they doing that? Now, really quickly, the work behind today's episode and this channel was made possible by Ground News, one of my sponsors that helps me keep these videos free for everybody. If you're not familiar with Ground News, what it does is it collects a huge variety of different news articles from all sorts of different sources and perspectives around any given particular topic. And on top of that, they also provide a lot of useful information that helps you evaluate the sources and their value. Some of the information they help provide is which way sources lean on the political spectrum, how factual they are known to be, and importantly, who funds the source, which can sometimes be very enlightening. I very often find very interesting stuff when I'm using Ground News. For example, when researching today's topic, I discovered an interview with a North Korean dissident who explained that North Korea's strategy is actually to get their soldiers killed, not to bring them home, because dead soldiers cannot speak about the outside world. And that explains a whole lot of the things that we've seen. I enjoy using Ground News, and if you're interested in trying it as well, you can actually get a 40% discount on their Vantage plan, which is the plan that I personally use to get access to all of their features, by going to ground.news/Paul. It bears noting that the number of troops that is being sent right now is even smaller than the original, far, far smaller. Current estimates from South Korean intelligence put it at around 1,000 additional troops that are being sent. And this small volume actually reveals a lot. It reveals that even more than before, the purpose of these troops is not to change the strategic nature of the battlefield. And if that is their intended purpose, that shows both Russia and North Korea in a far more desperate position than even I would estimate, if that is all that North Korea can possibly muster to send to Russia. So the purpose here is obviously nothing strategic. It is just to continue getting whatever they got out of the original deal. And all we've really seen so far North Korea get out of the original deal is air defense missiles from Russia. Significant perhaps, but not really all that significant. So more than likely, while the ultimate purpose of sending the troops isn't clear, their basic purpose is just to replace the massive amount of soldiers that North Korea has already lost in Ukraine, or rather in Russia, fighting against Ukraine's incursion. And the number that is being sent does not even close to replace the current losses. This seems like a band-aid solution to give North Korean units the minimum capacity needed to continue to carry out very basic missions. That shows a level of desperation of the current troops on the ground, and again, it shows North Korea's understanding of the fact that there's really no value of them sending anybody else, because if they really wanted to make a difference, they'd send a whole lot more. What corroborates this is that a few weeks ago, North Korean troops actually pulled back from the front line in the Kursk region of Russia because their losses were so great and they were not accomplishing anything. And now, just a couple of days before this announcement comes out, North Korean troops are starting to move back to the front line positions. So, as with everything we see in Russia's war against Ukraine, we see increasingly desperate measures just to stay in the fight. Now, that is very significant because often Ukraine is the one that is portrayed as just holding on by the skin of their teeth, trying to prevent Russia from taking more land from them. And Ukraine is often portrayed as, oh, they can't take any land from Russia, so this war is pointless. But in that discussion, what a lot of people miss is the very clear signals that the same thing is true on the Russian side. And as I've said in many videos before, this is not a battle of who is going to break through the front line today or tomorrow or even next month. This is a battle of who is going to win the ultimate war of attrition, whose economy is going to outperform the other side's economy and ultimately lead to a breakthrough moment on the front line when the other side is so exhausted that they can no longer support their positions. What we see is that Ukraine, even if the US backs out, still has the support of most of the rest of the world. And they have a lot of ammunition and firepower behind them to where if they wanted to get involved in a meaningful way, whether that means troops on the ground or just significantly ramping up support to Ukraine, they could easily break through in a moment. Whereas Russia, who has already brought in North Korean troops, foreign troops, cannot produce the same breakthroughs. So at this point, if Ukraine does get any additional meaningful support from their partners, it is not obvious at all that Russia will have any recourse to that level of support. Some people might say, well, they can use nukes, but that is not really an option for Russia. I've already made an entire video about that. I won't repeat all of that here. Russia, though, does not have international partners remaining that they can use to fortify their battlefield positions in a meaningful way. Ukraine does. So why don't Western partners take advantage of that situation? It all comes back to one of Russia's main battlefield strategies, where Russia wants to win by playing on an uneven battlefield. They want to win by leveraging every advantage they have, including international partners, foreign troops, while scaring the opponents away from taking the same steps. From a practical standpoint, Russia would have no legs to stand on if international partners put troops in Ukraine, because Russia has already done so inside of Russia. From a psychological standpoint, Russia has spent a lot of money and a lot of effort trying to convince the world that this would be a massive escalation and that doing this is warmongering, when again, it can't really be seen as warmongering when Russia has already taken this exact step. So while the headlines we're examining today might seem small and insignificant on the surface, North Korea is sending an additional 1,000 troops to Ukraine. Who really cares? It turns out that when you look at the realities behind those headlines that are creating the headlines, you get a much clearer picture of what is actually going on the battlefield and the current state of the war. Now, if you appreciated this video and the work that I continue to do on this channel, before you go, could I ask you for a quick favor? The reason I'm able to produce a lot of the insights that I do is because I am an independent analyst. I don't belong to a newspaper, and I don't belong to any other agency or organization that is telling me what to say. If you appreciate that work, would you consider becoming a patron and supporting this channel? To learn more about that, follow the link in the description of the video or scan the QR code on screen. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one.